Hello everyone, today I'm going to be filming a video on the tools I used when I worked at a car dealership for 90 days. Perhaps you're right out of high school, or if you're like me, suddenly decided to change careers and start something new. First thing that you need is a notebook. A notebook you feel comfortable writing in. And you want to grab a nice ink pen, one that's going to last, or maybe a package of them. Skip the Dollar Tree ones as they don't last as long. I probably went through 10 pens in the 90 days I was there, but in addition, you're going to take a lot of notes during your initial training. Where I worked, I had to go through an initial training period. It was about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how fast I learned and how quickly I could pass all the tests and take the certification course at the end. The computer training was given through the manufacturers, and it was usually something I had to log into. We didn't have desktop computers where I worked, so I was working on an iPad. It made training much more difficult. Sometimes the iPad didn't work on certain training modules and tests, so I had to wait for somebody in a different department for their computer to be free before I could do the training, and that prolonged my 2-week period. Sometimes they won't let you sell cars until you are certified with the manufacturer. Obviously, you want to take notes as you're learning, but it also gives a good impression to the dealership that you're taking this seriously, because all dealerships usually have a 90-day evaluation period where they're looking to see, are you serious about this or what? Because there's a lot of turnover in dealerships. Once you've passed your certification and all your tests and you're able to sell, now the real fun begins when you get hands-on training in the actual cars that you're going to be test driving with customers. Once I started meeting with customers, I made sure that my desk was adequately supplied with things that I was going to need in the course of meeting with customers and writing up car sales. Also, where I worked, we had morning meetings every day to go over who sold cars the day before, the monthly goals, everybody's progress, and we also went over pending deals. At the meeting, it's a good idea to have a notebook ready to write notes, because sometimes the owner himself will come in and test you or provide some additional training to you that you may want to write down. Also, where I worked, the dealership actually issued their own lock and keys for the lockers that were there, but in the event they don't, pick up a small lock, and if they do, just note that they may charge in the event that you lose the key. I know my dealership charged like $100 for lost locker keys. Some tools that are absolutely crucial and necessary to have on hand at the dealership are these types of tools here. One of the tools that you're going to need is a socket wrench. This Craftsman one comes with different heads in the actual handle. There are others that you can buy that have the separate heads. What you're actually looking for is the 10 millimeter. Let's see if I can get it up close. 10 millimeter. And I have to say, these were the hardest of all to find. So, now the reason for this is because the screws that, are on the license plates look like this, for the most part. Okay. At the dealership, this is what they issued for the license plates. This screw head fits perfectly into the 10 millimeter socket wrench. So that's what you're looking for. In addition, you can also get, a flathead or Phillips head screwdriver to keep in your desk area or your locker, because when people turn in older cars and trade them in, you have to take off the license plates, and the license plates could have a multitude of different screws from people doing their own plates over the years. So you want to make sure you have all these types of tools available to you. The dealership does not provide them. And here's a warning about this. People will steal them. I had 3 of these stolen, and these are not cheap to buy. I bought my first few sets at Walmart. They came in a little nice compact container with multiple heads. I want to say that was about $13 or so. And I had them in my desk, and 3 times somebody stole them. Then I switched to this one. This was about $20. This one I kept on me at all times. Now, as a woman, I used to keep a bag at all times, a small bag. I got it at Home Goods, and it was actually a wine bag. I don't have a picture to show you because I threw it away when I quit working at the dealership, but it was a wine bag, so it held a bottle of wine. And it had a chain, so I'd put it around my neck and shoulder, and it would fit nicely at my side, and it was horizontally instead of vertical, so it laid there at my side, and it was almost like a fanny pack, except it was longer, so I was able to have all these tools in there. I noticed the men employees, they would just carry these around with them as needed. I didn't feel that that was convenient for me. I wore skirts and heels. I wasn't about to run back to my desk every 5 minutes for a tool or something of that nature. So these are just some tools that you want to have on hand and keep them locked away so other people do not steal them. Some other items you're going to need are markers. I don't know what your dealership is going to request of you. Mine wanted either black or blue Sharpie. They have these little tags after you sell a vehicle. If there's a trade-in, you have to put these new tags on the trade-in. And you have to write in either pen or marker on some of these types of tags. So just keep a blue and black Sharpie on hand. Again, they do not supply any of this for you. You have to supply it yourself. And the last thing you want to do is waste time going from person to person, say, hey, can I borrow a Sharpie? Hey, can I borrow a Sharpie? When you do that, it takes time away from your busy day and takes time away from you selling cars, which is ultimately what you get paid to do. I also kept a stapler and a staple puller at my desk because on occasion I felt the need to pull out a staple. I didn't want to break a nail. But in addition, there's always paperwork when you're writing up a sale that you have to staple. And again, they don't supply a stapler. So just bring one, even if it's a mini one, and keep it at your desk. You'll also want to have some pens on hand for your customers when they're signing the paperwork. It's a nice presentation to have like a set of pens that match. If not, just regular Bic pens, whatever kind of pens, just keep them in your little desk accessory. You don't want customers using your pen because you're going to need to hold on to your pen. And I found that when working at the dealership, every time I let a customer borrow my pen, I never got it back. So you're going to want to have extra pens there. Now, in addition, you don't want to have pens that are really expensive either. You don't want to get gold cross pens or anything like that because customers steal them. So just get some generic pens or cute little pens. I picked these up at the Staples office supply store. I think they were like $1.29. The next couple of items are kind of common sense, but I thought I'd mention it. You do want to have a small notebook pad or some type of small notebook at your desk because sometimes when I was preparing for a customer meeting, I would have notes in my head. Well, car dealerships get really busy and you get sidetracked. So I would write out questions I had or information that I needed to relay to the customer. I would keep a little notepad handy just for that purpose and then have those set aside. So when the customer came to my desk, I'd pull out their note and be able to, talk to them about the things I needed so that I wouldn't forget anything during the sale. The last tip I want to share with you is a marketing tip. Always keep a folder at your desk labeled something like testimonials or something like that. It's a good way to showcase all of the great reviews you get from your car sales and your happy customers. It builds a portfolio for you and it gives customers peace of mind what other customers had to say about past transactions. When asking your customers to leave a review for you, say something like, if I haven't provided you excellent service, if you have any questions, please let me know now because you will be getting a survey and the survey doesn't necessarily reflect my work. It could reflect anybody here. So it's a generic survey. If you want to talk with me about anything right now, if not, otherwise I'd appreciate all tens. Thank you. And that triggers in the customer's mind, oh, wow, yeah, this isn't just about this person. It could be about anybody in the dealership. They wouldn't know that. I wanted to share some personal experiences I had working at a car dealership in hopes that it will help you if you ever try to work at one and maybe avoid the pitfalls. When I first joined the dealership, they gave me an iPad. We did not have desktop computers to work on. I was told I would be in training for at least 2 to 3 weeks through the manufacturer. The manufacturer had a whole program on this iPad. I sat there every day, did the program, and at the end there was a test. The problem was the iPad didn't have the features to complete the test, so I had to wait for someone to go on vacation in a different department so I could use their desktop computer to complete the exam. I did pass the exam on my first try. I got certified, and then I was able to sell the cars. At this particular dealership, we only sold one brand of car unless somebody traded in a different brand. Then we could also sell that brand of car too, but we were only ever trained in this one particular brand of car. Going into this, I never had sold a car before. I never worked at a dealership at all before. I had worked in a commission-based role for 6 years prior to this, somewhere else, and it was a desk job. I did work with the public, but I never worked with people that were looking for high value items like a car. Selling to people looking for high dollar items, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and up, they know what they want. They come in looking for specific cars. The cars sell themselves for the most part. Most people wanted to know about the technology in the vehicles. I'm not really good at technology so much. I had studied the mechanics of the car. I had studied this, that, and the way that the company wanted me to sell the car. I really wasn't really good at hooking up your phone to your music player type of thing. It was surprising to me that that's what people cared about more than the fuel mileage of the car, or is the paint quality good? Does it end up peeling in 2 years? Those things. They just wanted to know, how does the radio work, and does it have a remote starter? I'm pleased to let you know that during the month of December, my first full month of selling cars, I sold 10 cars. Now, mind you, I had 6 coworkers that were seasoned at this. Most of them had been selling cars at one time or another. 2 of them had been selling cars maybe at other dealerships, but selling cars consecutively for 30 years. Some of the coworkers had maybe sold cars in the past and came back to it at this dealership. I did have a coworker that started with me, and he was just finishing up the training. I had already finished. He was already selling cars before he even finished the training. Despite having such competitive coworkers, I was still able to sell 10 cars. I'm not here to tell you it's easy to sell cars. It is hard work. It's a hustle. It's a daily grind. But it can be lucrative if you really want to sell cars. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from selling cars. It wasn't right for me, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be right for you. I wanted to put a myth to rest that car salespeople are slimy. None of my coworkers were slimy. I loved working with the people I worked with. Everybody is unique. We all have our flaws. We all have our good sides. We all have our bad sides. We all have our problems, whatever. One thing to note is that the car dealership I worked with, and I hear that this is across the board, they did not background check anybody before working there. I worked with people who had been in prison. I worked with people with criminal backgrounds. I worked with people who were in trouble with the law presently. I worked with drug addicts. I worked with alcoholics. And I can assure you that I was safe every single day on my job. I loved these guys. They were great. Can't stress that enough because people always say, oh, car salesmen, they're so slimy. The tactics may be slimy, but they're still human beings behind the job. A lot of drama happened with customers. Now, of course, customers are handing over large amounts of money, so you are going to expect to deal with a lot of drama. Anytime you're dealing in a public setting with customers, there's going to be some forms of drama. This was just exacerbated by the amounts of dollars they were handing over. In one such incident, we had a customer put a deposit on a vehicle that she was looking for, but she wanted certain features in it. The manager promised her that he could get her that vehicle of her dreams in a day or so. Another problem in the dealership is lack of communication. Sometimes managers will say this, that, the other thing, but unfortunately, they don't mean it. They just say it to pacify the customer. This particular manager had been a lifelong career car salesman, and I will say that his tactics were underhanded and undercut when he was a salesperson. He even said so himself. So I'm not bad-mouthing anybody. I'm just saying what he told me and what I saw. This customer waited for days for her car. In the meantime, we had a monetary deposit. Finally, she told him to forget it. She found the car somewhere else and she bought it. She wanted her money back. When this happened, it was upsetting to me because I was the salesperson, so I lost commission, I lost a sale. Now, mind you, it takes a long time to work with somebody, take them on test drives, and do all the paperwork. Here, I had wasted all that time with this customer, and she no longer wanted the car because of something the manager did. So just be aware that that does happen at dealerships. Something may not be your fault, but you will lose a sale. What happened next was totally shocking. It's in December, it's cold nights, icy roads, and the manager says, we need everybody to stay because customers are coming in late after work to buy cars for loved ones or themselves for Christmas presents. This particular evening was pretty busy. We had customers coming in past the 6:30 mark. We closed at 7. The manager said we would not be locking the door until all the customers had left for the evening because he wanted to accumulate as many sales as he could for the final month of the year. What I didn't know was the bookkeeper had never cut the check for the customer to return her deposit. The manager took me aside and informed me that I would have to take the deposit to the customer after we closed. We didn't close that evening until well after 8 o'clock. I just wanted to go home, take my shoes off, rest on the couch, eat dinner with my family. Instead, I had to drive an hour and a half on a very cold, freezing night in the dark on an opposite way from home. When I got to the town this customer lived in, everything was a one-way street. It was very hard to maneuver, very hard to navigate. My GPS was acting wonky. So eventually, I did make it to her house, but I didn't get home that night until midnight. Every day at the car dealership, the manager requested that we be seated in the conference room before he got there so that he could start the meeting immediately. That meant that I had to get up extra early in order to assure that I was seated in that conference room before the meeting began. I didn't really live far from the dealership, but I had to get myself ready and presentable for the day. Plus, I have animals and other people to care for here. I have a family. So it took longer for me to get up and make sure everybody else was taken care of and then get over there on time early so that I would be in the conference room and ready. If any of the sales were pending, they would talk about that. They would also talk about our quotas, how we're doing, and so forth. Also, they would take us on the showroom floor at times and train us a little bit on the cars. It wasn't as intense training as the manufacturer training that I did in the beginning, but it was good quality training because we got to do it in person. Seasoned employees would teach the newer employees things about the cars we may not have known or things that they didn't cover in training. Pretty soon, there was a lot of ice and snow on the ground outside. It started becoming very slippery and dangerous to take people on test drives. But customers, they want to go on test drives regardless. They don't care about the elements. They don't care about the weather. One day, the manager assigned sections of the parking lot to all of the salespeople. They didn't have a lot attendant, so they didn't have anybody to shovel snow. They didn't have anybody to clean off the cars. They didn't have anybody to do other things that were necessary on the parking lot. Every day on this ice, I had to walk outside and I had to make sure that in my section, all the cars were evenly parked in their spaces. I also had to make sure that every car had a back and front fake vanity plate. I also had to clean the windshields and hoods off of every car to make sure they were free of ice and snow. In addition, I had to check to see if any cars were out of gas. I would have to go get a gas slip from the sales manager. I would have to go take the car across the street to the gas station, and then I would have to park the car again. And then I also had to check any cars that were electric to see if they needed to be charged. I would then have to drive that car over to the charger. If there was a car charging, I'd have to take it off the charger and move it into a space. After doing this for a while, I realized that nobody else was doing it. I was the only one. But I asked my manager about this, and I said, why am I the only one doing these tasks in the freezing cold? And because I asked him that, he gave me an assignment that left 3 hours straight. He told me to go ahead and put vanity plates on every single car out in the parking lot because a lot of them were missing them because the guys weren't keeping up with their duties. So I went out there in the freezing cold. I had a skirt on that day and tall boots. And I went out there and I put vanity plates front and back of every single vehicle. When I came in, my legs were purple. At this point in time, I decided I was no longer going to be working at this dealership past 90 days. I had made up my mind. I did want to give it just one more month. Sometimes it's not possible to just walk away from a job. I was already burnt out from the prior job I worked at for 6 years, which was commission-based. This job was just adding burnout to my pile. I wasn't feeling fulfilled from this job. I felt like this job was a race every day. While I was able to get up and move around more than my previous desk job, the job itself is a high-paced hustle. It is a hustle every single day. In the mornings, we were expected to make between 12 and 25 phone calls before lunch. In the afternoons, we were expected to also reach out to customers by any means necessary, and I chose email. I would make 12 to 25 cold calls in the morning, and then I would also send out around 500 emails every single day. Take Christmas, for example. I would make my own little email campaign. In the background, the manager, he would also make marketing campaigns that he would mail out. But what I found was a lot of people didn't bring those in when they were looking for a car. And some of the addresses in the database that we had were really outdated, and the people never got them anyway. I would make up my own little mailing campaigns, and I would email them to the customers. Coming out of a very successful December, I decided that depending on what happened in January, I would most likely stay until the end of the month. The salespeople sat in the back row. There were desks side by side that we sat at. We had a partition in between to give customers privacy when meeting with them. Our desks pretty much were bare except for a few supplies, which I showed earlier in this video. One particular day, I was sitting at my desk and I was sending out my emails, and I looked up at the door and I saw a bunch of people coming in at the same time. Thought this was unusual for January because coworkers had said, just be prepared, it's going to slow way down in January. Nobody buys cars in January. We might get a person here or there, but it's not going to be like December was. I made my way out front just in case anybody needed help. There were other salesmen walking around on the floor, so I thought, well, I'll just go out there too, just in case. I made sure I was ready up front, waiting in case I could grab a customer too. When I got to the front, I realized none of these people were customers. I asked a coworker about it, and they said, those are new hires or people interviewing to work here. And I said, why would they be hiring a bunch of people? We're going into our slow month. I don't understand. We have a good team of 7. What's going on? And he informed me that the way car dealerships work is that they hire over and over again, and they weed out the weakest salesperson. And I said, well, I would hope that wouldn't be me because I made 10 sales this month. And he said, they expect you to do a lot more than that. Next day in our morning meeting was a chart on the wall with somebody else's name on there that I didn't know. I asked the manager who that was. He said he had hired a marketing specialist to come in and assist the salespeople. They created an office space for her near the salespeople, and her primary job was to call at least 100 people a day to set up appointments for customers to meet with salespeople so that we could sell cars. But I noticed that she had a quota. So I asked him, why would she have a quota if she's making appointments for customers to see us? And he said that sometimes customers already know what they want. Maybe they had been to a different dealership. They call in and say, hey, I want to buy this black SUV, red SUV, or what have you. And she will say, okay. She'll tell the manager, they'll write up the paperwork, and she'll get the credit for it. So I said, well, wait a minute. What if one of the salespeople here met with the customer and they call in and they just talk to her? What happens then? And he said that they would try to figure out who they met. Then another manager piped in and said, well, the problem with that is you should be following up with your customers. So you would know if they want to buy a car or not. And I said, okay, I see your point. So I made sure that every day I had a list of customers that had not bought a car from me that I met with, and I would follow up with them thoroughly. I think it was about a week into January when I noticed new people were starting to arrive. There were not enough desk spaces for everyone. There were already 7 employees, and now there was this marketing person who also had a desk space, and now there's 2-3 more people. They don't have a desk space. Out on the showroom floor, there were a few tables for customers to sit down. New employees would sit at those tables. They weren't made to do the training that I was made to do in the beginning. Whenever a customer came in, those new employees would be right on it, jump on the customer, and just start waiting on them.
This became very discouraging to me because I'm in the back row trying to do my job, but they weren't taking turns with all of us. Some of the more seasoned employees decided to go on vacation at this time because it's a slow month. I really hustled. I hustled every day to get those emails out. And eventually one Saturday, I think it was like the second week of January, I made 5 appointments to meet with customers for that one day. The appointments that I made were appointments to meet with me because I made the appointments. The manager said if we made the appointment, it was our customer, our sale. I was very encouraged by this because 5 appointments for one day, that's potentially 5 car sales. The most car sales I ever had in one day was 2 cars. I was really looking forward to this Saturday. I was super excited. When my first appointment arrived, the second appointment showed up too early. They showed up right when my first appointment got there. They wanted to be seen immediately, so my manager gave that appointment to a different coworker. I wasn't upset because I couldn't juggle 2 appointments at the same time. I was still too new. Other coworkers could do that. I've seen coworkers juggle 4 or 5 people at the same time. That comes with training, that comes with experience. I was not there yet, so I didn't mind at all. I was happy that a coworker got a chance to work with a customer. My manager had set up a board for the appointments that we made with our initials by them. The other salespeople were supposed to know that when that person arrived, to be shown the salesperson they were going to be working with. I noticed that some of the newer people did not abide by this, and they would start taking the customers that had made appointments with me. At the end of that Saturday, even though I had set 5 appointments for myself, I only got to wait on 2 people. Monday morning came, and a woman I had been emailing and calling finally responded and said she would like to meet with me. She was coming that afternoon. And then I noticed later in the day when I went to send her a follow-up email to say, I'm looking forward to seeing you, somebody else had taken it out of my name and put it in the name of the woman in marketing. I went to my manager and said, why was this customer taken out of my name and put in marketing? He explained to me that that shouldn't have happened. He was sorry and he put it back in my name. The woman in marketing knew that it had been put in her name, so she made a note to follow up with this customer. And not only did she follow up with the customer, but she changed the appointment. And she changed the appointment and made it in her name. I found this out. I was really upset. I didn't know why marketing was undercutting me. So I went to the manager again. I said, I'm not going to stand for this. I know this is a car dealership. I know things can be underhanded, but we've all gotten along here, and there's no reason for this. Marketing isn't sales. I'm a salesperson. My job is to get people through the door and to sell them a car. I don't understand why I'm now battling with marketing about this. This doesn't make any sense. Could you please help me here? So he went to marketing and he said, stop it, knock it off. I ended up calling the customer and I said, I'm so sorry. I see that your appointment has been rescheduled. The original appointment was with me. Can I still meet with you at the time you're coming in? And she says, actually, I'm glad you called. I didn't want that appointment time anyway. Can we meet Tuesday at 4 o'clock? I said, absolutely. So I made the appointment for Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Tuesday morning came. I was in the morning meeting and I told everyone, including the lady in marketing, that I made the appointment for this customer Tuesday at 4 o'clock. I asked everybody to please not intervene, that this was a cluster from the beginning, and just let me deal with it. She was ready to buy a car, and I was ready to sell her one. I hadn't been making many sales this month as it was because of the new employees that were hired. So therefore, I really needed the sale. I don't know how many people know this, but car salespeople do not make a lot of money. They give you a base rate. Around here, the base rate I've seen as low as $200 a week. We were fortunate that the base rate here was about $375 a week. I don't know anybody that can live for $375 a week. That hardly covers gas and groceries. Our bread and butter was the commission that we earned selling vehicles. Finally, my last day was the 90th day I was there. The employee manual said that if you were there for 90 days, you would receive a bonus. I believe it was between $1,000 and $3,000. I don't recall the exact amount. So I knew I couldn't leave before the 90th day. I needed to stay that full 90 days to get that bonus. However, even though everybody knew I had this lady coming in at 4 o'clock to meet with, everybody was well aware of the cluster that happened with marketing. The manager came to me at 3. I needed to prepare for my 4 o'clock. I needed to get the car off the lot, make sure there was no snow and ice on it. I needed to make sure it had gas in it. I needed to make sure that it was parked appropriately so that she would have no trouble getting in it for her test drive. I also needed to make sure that it had a plate on it to take the test drive. These were all things I had to do in a skirt, heels, and ice and snow. So it was going to take a moment to do all this. The manager asked me to cover for another employee in a different department that I didn't work in. I said to him, what would I be doing? And he said, you'd be sitting at the desk greeting customers and answering phones. And I said, well, normally I wouldn't mind doing that at all. However, I am waiting for this appointment that you knew about, and she's coming in at 4 o'clock. I need to do all the things to get ready for this car demonstration. He told me that he wanted me to cover for this other employee. So reluctantly, I did, even though I had paperwork to get ready and I had these things to do. I reluctantly went over to cover for this other employee. 3:15 came, and a new coworker, who I didn't know very well. He was one of the new hires in January. He had worked at another dealership down the street and was very successful where he worked, but he ended up being hired here. He came up to me and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, unfortunately, I have to cover. I'm sitting here answering phones, greeting customers, but I do have an appointment coming in at 4, as everybody knows, and I would like to get to my desk so I can prepare for that, because I don't want to hold this lady up. She's had this appointment for a few days now. And he said, I will cover for you. And he said, by the way, how many cars have you sold this month? And I said, well, it's been a tough month, to be honest. I haven't really sold many. I think at that point I had sold maybe 6. And he said, wow, that's it? Really? You only sold 6 cars? I said, yeah, that's all I've sold. Why? This is my 2nd month. I know that's not very great, but I'll take it. I mean, what's going on? He goes, well, I've sold way more than that, and I'm new here. I've only been here for like 3 weeks. And I said, well, I'm also very new at this. I've never sold cars before. This is my only 2nd month ever doing this. I said, you should be selling cars faster than I can with the experience that you have. And he said, well, you know what they're doing, don't you? I said, I have no idea. He said, they're flooding the floor. I said, what does that mean? He said, they hire new people to weed out the bad ones. I said, what do you mean bad ones? He goes, the underperformers. And I said, what's an underperformer? He goes, like you. I said, like me? What do you mean me? He's like, this is your 90th day. I said, yes, it is. He's like, you sold 6 cars this month. You're going. This is your last day. I said, you bet it is. You're right. It is my last day. I went back to my desk. I had to go to the manager to get a gas slip. I explained to him that I really needed to fill up that car for my 4 o'clock appointment. He gave me a gas slip. I grabbed a plate. I plated up the car, went across the street, got gas, came back, went back to my desk, printed all the paperwork that I needed for the sale because I knew this lady wanted to buy the car. It was pretty much guaranteed. She told me that over the phone. I went to the restroom to freshen up for 30 seconds. I came out, and when I did, my customer was seated with another salesperson. Now, this salesperson was a friend of mine. He had been there since the day I started. I was really fond of this guy. He helped train me. He was unaware that that was my appointment because the manager had brought the lady to his desk. He never told my friend that it was my appointment. I graciously took the paperwork, took the car keys, and I went back to his desk. I said hello to the customers. I didn't tell them who I was, and I handed him the paperwork and the keys. He immediately looked up to me and said, oh no, this was your appointment. I said, don't worry about it. It's okay. It really is okay. And the customer said, oh yeah, I was supposed to meet with her. I said, don't worry about it. You're in really good hands. He has 30 years experience. And with that, I turned, I went to my locker, I got my stuff, I cleared off my desk, I walked over to the manager, I handed him my locker key and said, I'm done. And I went to my car, and I have not regretted it a day since. I never did get my 90-day commission bonus that I was supposed to get. The last paycheck I got was far from what I had earned with the cars that I sold. I found out later that the manager had adjusted my sales numbers for the month. In addition, every day I went there, clocked in, clocked out, and these were true times that I was there. I was not paid what I should have been paid for the hours I put in there. I also found out that the manager had been overwriting all of my time entries on my time card. It was a digital time card that was on the wall in the break room. And he would write in by pen different hours. My paychecks always showed that I worked less than 30 hours a week. I was working there 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. most days. One day a week I would have the day off, and I rarely got the day off because if you have a car sale and you meet with a customer, say on a Monday, you need to come back to complete the paperwork on a Tuesday, you need to be there even if it's your day off, or you don't get the commission, at least at this dealership. So that's just another thing to be aware of. Since quitting there, I did have the opportunity to talk to a few people, and I found out that in this field, you are expected to do more than your share as a car salesperson. You're not just there to sell your cars. You're not just there to sell cars. You're not just there to meet with the customers. They will literally use you up and spit you out. If you go on to become a car salesperson, I hope these tips help you, and I hope you find ultimate success in whatever you choose to do. Thank you so much for watching.